Hey, Chandler Bolt here, and joining me today is Shawn Vossler. Shawn is a legendary copywriter, an affiliate marketing expert, and the creator of Increase Academy. He's well known for his role as an affiliate manager for Ty Lopez and Sam Ovens. And in his new book, Seven Figure Marketing Copy, he teaches people how to craft engaging copy that sells. This is something that's super, super important. We talk about this all the time. To sell more books is the copywriting behind that. And no, it's not how to copyright your book, but it's words that sell. All right. So today we're going to be talking about how he sold like 25,000 copies of his 37, 47, 57, depending on price testing dollar book that isn't even on Amazon and how to use copywriting to sell books. This is going to be a fun one. I'm excited for this. Shawn, welcome.
Dude, Chandler, and good job summarizing. It's tough to get that all concise, but yeah, man, it's a great to see you again. We've known each other for a long time, but it's been a while since we've been able to connect. So just kind of a serendipitous moment of the fun story behind what I've been doing, connecting with what your students are kind of facing. So excited to explore that with you, man.
For sure, and it's exactly what I'm excited about, and. I mean, I've just been seeing what you're doing you're such a great example of using a book at the center, it seems like, of your business. And so I'm like, you got to come on and we got to talk about this. So let's start there. Like, why a book and how does it fit in with your business goals? Like this is a prominent part of your business. Like, why is that?
Yeah, it's interesting because it has become like the star in the center of the solar system of all the things I'm doing, right? And it was born out of just me collecting a lot of the quote unquote SOPs, the standard operating procedures in my own business. So I ran for a long time an agency. You mentioned the JV brokering with folks like Ty and Sam and others. But through that process, like I had to create a lot of copy quickly, right? Like it was, I was the main kind of force behind that. And it's, as you know, can be fairly difficult to outsource copywriting. So, through the process of that over, about 3-year time period, I just collected frameworks that I used and like strategies and what worked and what didn't. And it came to a point where it's like, you know what, like, I think this would be a cool book and I want to get this stuff out to the world. And B, like when you do like $100 million in revenue with other, clients based on your promotions, you tend to look at it and say, that would be kind of cool if even if I did a tenth of that for myself, So that was kind of the birthplace of it. But it wasn't necessarily like, I know a lot of people will create books to, as more of a brand building thing. Mine was, I really like, I'm like anal retentive with this stuff. I really like to learn it. So putting it into a book was like a cool experience as well. And that was really the foundation of what jumped it off. And now I've been able to transition my business. So it used to be about 90% agency, 10% my own products. Now it's about 90-10 the other direction. So that's been a cool transition, kind of get out of that client world, even though, it's profitable, but it's not as fun.
Yeah, for sure. And anyone who's been in the agency world juggling a bajillion clients, or even just a couple clients that are massive, can relate to that. So I think a couple things, you're a man of many talents. I think a couple of which are copywriting and design. And that really culminates in the book, and you have the most intentional design, and it's very you. Like, so whether it's your landing pages, it's the book. So why is that such a core part of your copywriting? And then why is that so important to you to do that as part of the book? Like it's just not only is the copy good, but it's very well designed. So how do you do that, and why is it important?
Sure, man. Yeah. Well, I have a design background. So I actually went to school, and like a passion of mine back in the day, like I really wanted to go to like whatever school the Pixar animators went to. Right. So like I've been obsessed with, I'm just a big fan of art. Like, and I'm, little just side note, I license most of the imagery I use in my books. I don't create it from scratch. Otherwise it would be like a 10,000 hour project. So the imagery have a lot of fun with doing. I do all the design and layout myself on the computer, but I license the imagery. But it's like you said, it's intentional. Now it started as like I just enjoyed doing it, but now after I've looked at it retrospectively, I see it as especially in the advertising side, like getting the word out about the book. It's very visually engaging, and just with the type of ads I do on Facebook to promote the book, it gets that first ball rolling of attention, in the copywriting lingo. So, but also now I tie it into I believe it adds a lot of perceived value to the book. So they might buy it for the pretty pictures, but once they get into it, they're like, wow, this is pretty darn good information. So, anybody listening, like your cover, your page layout, it can have a big influence on how the content is digested. But just a little word of warning, like it's not like you want to go too ham yourself if you're not like a designer. Like definitely work with a designer if you want to go that route. But I've happened to have, about 15 years experience doing that. Yes. So it helped a lot. Yeah.
Because you're a unicorn. I think a lot of people think, I could do the design myself, and it is not good. So if you don't have an extensive background in design, probably better to hire an expert.
Yeah. And that's the nice thing about design skills. It's become somewhat commoditized. So you can, $10, $20 an hour, you can get a really good designer to help you do with the book stuff. But yeah, it's an underrated part of the process, but something to come to after, you do all the stuff that matters, the content,
Yeah. So you've taken a non-traditional approach as part of the publishing and selling of the book. And it's not on Amazon as far as I can find. Maybe, maybe there's a higher price copy or something, but it seems like you've exclusively sold the book off of Amazon. What was the why behind that decision?
Yeah. So actually it's been about a year discussion of how to go about this, and I may have to get your expertise on it eventually too. But I think this will resonate with a lot of the listeners. Like when you're putting together a book, one of the things, if you're like kind of OCD or like a perfectionist, you're afraid to put it out to the world oftentimes until you think it's perfect, which it just never will be or is, right? So I had that barrier in front of me, and there's two ways to do it. It's either you push through it and you put a lot of time and get it to the point where you can finally take it to the world and publish it, or what I decided to do to give myself some runway to actually get paid to write it is I got to the point where it was like a minimal viable book, right? Like in whatever you want to call it. Like it was good enough where I was like, I can keep updating this and be proud of it. And then I actually published it in a membership area. Like I use Teachable, but there's millions of them. And then I update the book regularly. And when I started selling it about 2 years ago, had a small list, small fan base, and just they gave me a lot of great feedback on it. And it's grown from, when I first published it was about 85 pages. Now it's about 400. And it's not that more is better. It's just I've been able to flesh it out and get paid to do it at the same time. Where if I go to physical print and I put it out on Amazon, I'm kind of stuck with editions. But I am going to go that route eventually now that I've sold about 25,000 units. And there's a huge demand for the physical product, especially it being like a pretty book, like very photo intensive. So that's the next phase, which I'm hoping to get to by March. So yeah, the model there, it was more out of necessity to not lean on my own perfectionism too much.
I see. And so have all those copies, those 25,000 copies, has that all been digital copies? Has there been any physical copies?
Yeah, no, all digital. And, I upload it as a PDF. I did some fancy scripting on the website so that when you buy it's actually a password protected. I don't want to get into tech too much, but I can get new editions uploaded, every single month. And some people print it out. I give them permissions to print if they want to, print it at Kinko's or something. But you know how it is with physical prints that can get very expensive unless you do it in bulk.
For sure.
But yeah, I like the margins too a lot. Like,
oh my gosh, yeah,
digital.
for sure, for sure. But I think I've seen, maybe this is a workbook or something that for one of your programs, because I feel like you also have like very good looking workbooks and printable. Is that something different from this copywriting book?
So I do, and so I'll do test prints. I've done,
Nice.
I know if you're on the podcast, can't really see this, but I've done like hardcover test prints cool. and for well, now my camera's out of focus, but conceptually, I like to print it out as I do new editions so that people can visually see the representation of it. And I've also decided, like, anybody who's bought the book digitally, I'm going to credit them towards the physical edition, the amount that they paid, so that when the physical does come out, they'll be able to get it in a physical copy. So, cool. Yeah.
And so what would you say to the person? Cause I think a lot of people have limiting beliefs around this, where they're like, how could I possibly charge $37 for a PDF? Like, what are your thoughts on that? And how have you done that to where it's
sure?
I mean, you've had 25,000 people say, "Hey, I will gladly pay money for that for that PDF."
Yeah, and it was $57 for about a year. I just kind of discounted it recently, and I've sold it for $99 and sold it fairly regularly at that price. So it comes down like. And I know when we were getting ready for this discussion, we talked about how we want to get into marketing a little bit, but that really is what drives the price as well, right? So it's all about, can you give a compelling argument for the price, right? Like a $5.99 book on Amazon is pretty low. Like, I'll do it all the time. I'll be like, Kindle $5.99. Like, I don't even hardly like read the description. If I like the title and the cover, we're all guilty of that, right? I have like 1,000 Kindle books I've not read. But so when you get into the higher price points, you have to be able to justify it and just make it a no-brainer for the problem that you're solving. Mine's a nonfiction book, like many of the folks I'm sure listening, but it solves a very specific problem, which is to put a very fine point on it, who my audience is determining the price as well. So I target very specific audience of not just entrepreneurs who aren't sure why they're not selling as much as they know they should. So that's a weird demographic, right? But I like to tell people, like, don't sell to a demographic, sell to a situation. And that's what my sales page is all about, by the way. It's not about copywriting until near the end. And I did that very specifically so that I could target a larger niche. If the web page was like copywritingisgreat.com and I sold it as a copywriting book, that would limit me to people who already know that copywriting is important, are looking for books on copywriting. And that's a much smaller demographic to target versus entrepreneurs who are confused as why they're not selling nearly as much as they know they should, right? And the whole page is geared towards convincing the individual who's reading the page, hopefully an entrepreneur who isn't sure why they're not selling as much as they should, that the missing piece of the puzzle is copywriting. And I make a compelling argument on that page. And that's, at that point, if you make that argument, somebody has a business and they know they should be selling more, I could present it as a $1,000 book with the right context and make the sale. But the medium of the book kind of gives you a price point upper level. But I've been very happy with, being able to move it at $37 to $100 very regularly.
Yeah, that's great. And guys, he's teaching copywriting, and you might not even have noticed that in the way that he positioned the book. Right. And that's a lesson for everyone listening, everyone watching, is how you position it. And like he said, I love that quote, which is, don't sell to a demographic, sell to a situation. So what's the trigger that causes people to search for the topic of your book? and sometimes, like he's saying, it's like they might not even be problem aware. They might not know that the problem is copywriting. So it's your job, through the title, the subtitle, the book description, the introduction, like that's the Joe Sugarman slippery slope into the topic of your book. And so I love how you did that and positioned that. And I think that's just such a takeaway. for everyone here. And then tying it to, it's about the results that the book drives, not about the medium of the book, because people pay for an outcome. They don't pay for the thing. They don't wake up and say, I want a copywriting book. They wake up and say, I want more customers for my business. And that's not happening. So I'm willing to pay for whatever the medium is to get to that thing. And so I'm not saying anything that you haven't already said, but just hopefully really driving that point home for folks. And so I want to kind of move in from that into, when you've sold 25,000 copies, how have you done it? Like what, how have you sold so many copies? How do you drive traffic? Because this isn't like, put the book on Amazon and Amazon brings customers. This is, you're bringing people to this page. They're giving you their credit card information, all those things. So how have you sold so many copies?
Sure. Yeah. It's, it was, I mean, going back to that last point, it was that realization, and it's what I do as a marketer, right? Like I came into the book world a little different than most. Like a lot of people know how to write a book and then don't know how to market it. Like I knew how to market it, but I didn't. Half the books on my shelf, by the way, are about how to write books and how to organize information. Because to me, it's a very difficult thing to do. Like I'm all over the place. My stuff is a lot more ADHD than I would like it to be. So I'm learning, like a lot of my time is spent learning how to structure the content. But to your question, like how did I do that? It's a fairly simple funnel. Like I've built all kinds of crazy complex funnels over my life, but the funnel I run now is a Facebook ad to a landing page, right? Nothing too fancy there. But the messaging part that we just kind of touched on, that's where I think the magic starts to form, because in the United States, I'm not sure that probably now with the situation we're in, but I know for years it was about 500,000 new businesses started a month in the United States. So that's a pretty darn big segment of the population that's getting into selling a thing, right? And of course the title of the book probably would be better served being something about selling, but I as a copy guy and a marketer, it felt a little more authentic to go that route. But the targeting, I went up a level. Like I didn't go so broad as like entrepreneurs in general, even though I have a ton of different entrepreneurs that have bought. But the messaging itself is a very specific situation, as we talked about. I'm trying to think of another example, like your self-publishing platform, school product, for instance, right? You can either market to people who want to write a book and know they want to write a book, which is a decent sized population, and it's one that's fairly easy to target. And the common line, like everybody has a book in them, right? Like that's pretty common. But you guys do something which takes it up a level, and a lot of your marketing I've seen in the past, and probably still is this way, focuses on the benefit to your business for having a book. It's a subtle difference, right? It's a situation where they may not be aware of how powerful the authority building, the trust building, the power of having a book can be. So you market that message out to the world, and you target entrepreneurs who are looking to grow their influence, right? So anybody listening, like try to think of, like, you've got the topic, the subject of your book or your course or whatever it is you're selling. Now think of the different situations people are in that could benefit from it at a higher level. And that's where you want to take your messaging from. So that messaging, it's on my sales page, it's in my ads. And that's why Facebook, I've been able to like my target audiences are generally in like the 20, 30 million person size. And if Facebook ads, that's pretty darn big. It's not niched down. But the messaging is what segments. They see the billboard as they're driving down the street or scrolling down the page, and it self-selects, right? They say, "Oh, I am an entrepreneur who could benefit from more sales." But that's really the premise. And after that, you can just kind of scale it out. I have an upsell to the book about agency development, things like that. But on the surface, that simple funnel has allowed me to focus on the messaging without getting so bogged down and like bunch of different ads and stuff like that.
Yeah. So what percentage of your sales would you say of that 25,000 have come from Facebook ads versus something else?
Probably about 80%. I've 20% likely. That's actually good. I should know that number, but I actually have an affiliate program with it too, right? And I actually love it when affiliates promote because, believe it or not, well, you probably know this doing Facebook ads. Facebook ads is it can get pretty expensive per front end unit, right? So I'm pretty happy if I'm doing like a 1.5 ROAS on the front end, which, return on ad investment. If I put $1 in, I make $1.50 on the book itself. But a lot of times, depending on the season, the holiday season was rough because everyone's using ads. You might just break even on the front end, but I've even had times where it's like 4 or 5 times X, even on a $37 offer, but kind of just depends. But yeah, having affiliates is a good way because it's very warm traffic. They can recommend the book to their audience. And I plan on doing a lot more of that actually this year.
I see. And so have you ever tested any other platforms outside of Facebook to run ads to the funnel?
It's funny. Perform? Yeah. And by the way, another good tip on the advertising side, if you can get the pieces of the puzzle working well, like partnering with an advertiser, like I started trying to do my own ads and it was just too much to do everything. Right. Then I partnered with a buddy of mine who does Facebook ads. That's all he does. And for a long time, he crushed it with the ads, right? And it was nice to have someone else focus on the nuts and bolts. Now I've recently started taking it back in-house because I want to be able to rapidly test new stuff and actually use that data in my training and stuff. But like you may not, if you have the budget for it, getting somebody else to help you set up and manage the ads is very useful as well. But if you have the capacity to do it yourself, great. Like you're going to save a lot of money. And I'm sorry, I forgot actually what the question was.
I was just asking if you, no, you're good. You're good. If you've tested other platforms.
Right. On advertising.
So have they performed well or no?
Yeah. So I know YouTube is my next big platform I need to crack. It's like Facebook. Well, for sure. Facebook is a pretty easy low hanging fruit for me because it's just like, I know how it works so well, right? Just like anything else, the better you know it, the easier it is. But I know the opportunities there for YouTube to scale much better, actually, because it's a whole different segment of the population that uses it regularly. I need to dive in. It's on my platform, but I do some retargeting on there and does well. But that's on my list, of the places to go for sure.
Nice. And I know earlier you mentioned that don't sell to a demographic, sell to a situation. That being said, I mean, I'm sure you probably know ballpark demographic. Like what is that demographic ballpark that's purchasing this book?
Yeah, it's interesting because and it's kind of a side effect of being a pretty logical, analytical marketer myself. Like most of my sales pages are pretty logic based, right? I obviously I'll tie into the emotional side, but I'm pretty like, here's the facts and it makes sense that you should do this thing, right? And I've been trying in the last few months actually to get in touch with my more emotional side to create more, because I feel like I'm missing out about half the population. So I'm about
Same.
Yeah, it's about 70% male. And it's actually, I've sold it all over the world, which is wild. I'm always surprised to see, obviously US is my biggest audience, but like Australia, it's huge.
Yeah.
And even,
does it skew older, younger?
It does skew younger. And I think it's like people see themselves in you a bit when they can connect. And it's like, if I were to, on the demographic side, like if I were to get other individuals of different demographics to actually do the promotion, I bet you I could mix it up quite a bit, right?
For sure.
Even on the ad side. But yeah, I think that generally is where people will start, is like, you'll sell to people like you because they will connect with you because they read your copy and see themselves, but that's not necessarily a terrible thing, but there is a lot of opportunity to branch into other worlds.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think YouTube would do well for you for exactly that reason. Of like, that's almost an interesting thing of like knowing the demographic of your books and then knowing the demographic of the platform. And then how do you platform match from an ads perspective, an overlay. So if you're selling to older women, Pinterest, and maybe even Facebook, if you're selling to younger men, then probably YouTube more often. Or if you're it's just like, I mean, I know you know all this stuff from a marketing perspective.
But it is a good discussion to have. But I think you start, like, I started in a Facebook group that, and by the way, organically was where I really started getting my traffic at the beginning, because I didn't have a huge audience, but I leveraged my Facebook and brought people in to a Facebook group who are interested in the subject, and they become kind of the nucleus of my audience, right? And I actively bring people into that group, still about 11,000 members now, and nurture that, because, you know, they're the ones that are going to give you the best feedback on the guide and any other training you add to the business. But anybody listening, like, oh, Facebook has all this stuff, you know, start organically. You know, we were talking for a minute about Clubhouse before we got on here. It's a new app. You know, we don't have to dig into it too deeply, but it's another place you can find a community of like-minded individuals who are interested in your topic, get feedback, right? Even on Instagram, like connecting with influencers in your world and giving them good incentive to promote your product, right? Like you don't have to go the ad way, because it is a lot, like, and it's expensive from a mistake standpoint. You know, I've had ads screw up and spend a lot of money where I shouldn't have, you know.
You pay for an education on the platform, that's for sure. Hey, Shawn, I want to kind of land the plane here and ask a couple questions on this, because obviously this is your bread and butter and what you do and what your book's about, copywriting. And I know I kind of touched on it at the beginning, but for those who maybe haven't heard of it before, what is it? And then how specifically, like, if you have a couple tips on how people listening can utilize the skill set of copywriting to help them sell more books.
Sure. Yeah. You know, it's funny, because in the process of putting this book together on copywriting, you know, I thought I had a pretty good grasp on what it is, what it's for, but through the process of exploring this world, like, my whole concept of the whole thing is blown up a lot. But in the essence of it, it's really the messaging that you're putting out to the world about your product, your service, or yourself, right? It's the words, it's the language, it's the videos. But most people in a traditional sense will see it as like the headline and body copy on a sales page or an email, you know, subject line. And so the skill of copywriting is learning how to persuade people to buy the stuff you want to do or that you're selling. Not to be confused with copy, RIGHT, which is, you know, the rights to your content. Some people mix that up, but you know, it's copywriting is in the world of marketing, but also in the world of sales and also in the world of branding. Like, it's an overarching skill set that it's really important to learn, because, you know, there's a Decker, I forget his something Decker, you know, the dude who basically came up with modern day marketing. He said there's really only two parts of business, especially when you're getting started. There's product innovation, and then there's customer acquisition. And that customer acquisition world is where copywriting really thrives. But I've been finding that the copywriting also influences a lot of my product innovation. So just a small aside to that, I will write a sales message for a product before I'll start building the product, because through the process of writing that sales message, I will, and researching it for that matter, I will come across more problems that I want to solve, or I'll come across more headaches that I can address. And the innovation is actually born out of the language of the sales page. So it's a little backwards, it might seem, but it will, it's a good place to start exploring product development as well.
That's so good. And I think one big takeaway for a lot of folks is that marketing and copywriting starts before you start writing your book. Or at least it should. For a lot of people, it doesn't.
Here's a good example of where copy lives, like a sales message. The introduction to most books, and most of the authors I'll talk with or just discuss, they're like, "Oh, I love your sales page. Like, man, I wish I could do something like that." I'll be like, "Send me your book, or I'll buy it, or whatever." And I'll usually read their introduction, and their introduction is a brilliant sales message. They're selling people on reading the book. I'm like, literally, I did this for a friend of mine. I was having some fun, and I literally copied and pasted his introduction into a sales page, and I was like, dude, there's your sales page. All you got to do is modify the ending to be a call to action, right? So a lot of people like overanalyze what copy is, what it should be. Like they try to use templates, and of course there's useful templates and outlines out there, but the principle at heart, right? Like persuading somebody that what you have is important to them. Not that it's just important, but it's important to them. So, that's really, if you can get that principle down, that you're always talking to somebody in like second person, like, you've had problems with this and this and this, blah, 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 blah. That's going to drive a lot of the pieces of copy you produce.
That's so great, man. We're in 100% alignment on that, because that is what we tell our students all the time is your introduction is selling people on reading the book. And that means that your introduction is actually, if you just shorten that, is your book description and is the back matter on the back of your book. It's just that in shorter and less words, right?
And literally like the introduction to my book is the sales page. Like I'm not even like, they're the same. I modified it obviously quite a bit, but in general, it's the exact same, I'm preaching the same, gospel kind of thing.
Yeah. And I'm sure you probably did this, or at least this is what we recommend a lot, which is write the introduction first and then revise it last. So it's the starting point so that you write a better book. And then you come back at the end to make sure you articulately sell people.
It'll change a lot. Yeah. It'll change quite a bit. By the time you're at the end, I've rewritten several parts of my book several times, because as I continue down that's why I like selling it in the digital format that I do, is I'm being paid to like research, right? Which I love doing. I love learning about this stuff. It's a lot of people, and there's nothing wrong with the model of selling a book as a brand builder and things like that. But my list has grown considerably, but it's mostly buyers, and they're mostly like hyper influenced because they've gone through my book, and the content in the book, at least from what I hear, is pretty darn decent. So that's like killer brand building. I don't have to work too hard to build my authority, because they're already getting results from the stuff in my book.
That's amazing. It's awesome. Shawn, this has been great. Final couple questions. Knowing what you know now, what would your advice be to Shawn that hadn't written the book yet, or maybe all the other Shawns that are listening or watching that are about to go on this journey of writing and publishing a book?
Yeah, especially like, so I have ADHD, clinical, been diagnosed, blah, 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 blah. It's not an excuse. It's just a situation, right? So for me, it is a superpower. The hard thing with it is that it can be very difficult to organize information. And books are literally information that's been organized. And that's why they're valuable, right? Like they're valuable because someone has gone out and dug up a bunch of Wikipedia articles and summarized them into a principle-based guide that has actionable information in it, right? Like in essence, the information overload that we have in the world, you can learn everything you can learn in my book. You can learn on YouTube, but it's not structured, right? And you're going to be you're going to be in a dark room looking for a light switch. The goal of the book, of course, is to just hand you the light switch and make it a lot easier. So for me early on, I struggled a lot with the blank page of like, I literally could not I didn't know how to structure content in a way that benefited much less an ADHD person, but a normal person, right? So early on, something I wish I would have done sooner is start the research process of how to write a book. Like there's, you build a business around it, how the structure issues. So going back, that's really, like I said early on, half these books are about teaching and writing books, because it is the area that I did struggle with the most. And one, I'll try to keep it very succinct, but a frustration people have when they're writing a book or a guide or a blog post, anything, is it naturally makes sense that writing should be as easy as speaking. It makes sense, right? Logically. But I came across, I wish I would have known this early on. They're two very, 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 very different skills for humans. For thousands of years, you don't forget how to speak, right? It's built into our brain as it's the wiring of our brain. We speak, we communicate, we tell stories. But writing is a learned skill, just like drawing, just like learning another language. It's something you need to take time to internalize. So that's helped a lot. I don't think you have to wait for that to make 100% sense, but start collecting resources, pick up publishing school, stuff like that, that will help you structure your content in a way that you won't be as frustrated when you look at a blank page. I wish I knew that 5 years ago.
Yeah, that's great, man. That's awesome. Well, Shawn, how can people find out more about you, and how can people buy your book?
Oh man, the pitch part. No, I'm just kidding. This in the AIDA, marketing part is where you get into the call to action, but I won't do it too strong. Shawn.co, easy domain name, SEAN.co. That's where you can find me. You can connect with me on Instagram and Clubhouse. I'm like obsessed with Clubhouse now, as we've discussed, at Shawn Vossler, Instagram, all that good stuff. But if you want to pick up the book, it's just shawn.co/copy, COPY. And, let me know that you heard on this podcast so I can give Chandler some credit for it. But, I appreciate you having me on, man, because this is a discussion I'm very passionate about. Like, if I were to write another book, it'd probably be super meta on the writing books and selling books, marketing part. So I love talking about this stuff.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. And your topic is something I'm super passionate about. So, copywriting is at the core of, it's a huge part of why we've been able to scale so much at self-publishing school, is because I committed to learn the skill set. So guys, if you're thinking about could copywriting help me or not from a book sales perspective, grab a copy of the book, Shawn, SEAN.co/copy. Grab a copy, and I think you won't regret it. This is such a fundamental skill that's going to help you sell more books. So Shawn, man, this is great. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, brother. What a great conversation. We'll have to do it again sometime.
Yes, sir.